Do you spend most of your days sitting at your desk staring at a blank screen? I know I do as a business owner, a small business owner myself. So if you relate to that, I'm going to give you 3 important ways that you can find writing inspiration again. Welcome back to the Intrepid Emma YouTube channel. I'm Intrepid Emma, and this is where we talk about copywriting, content marketing, and entrepreneurship. If that sounds good to you, click the subscribe button down below and hit the little bell so you never miss a video. Alright, today we're going to be talking about writing inspiration, where to find it. As a small business owner, especially in your early couple of years, you may be feeling a little uninspired because there's just so much of the practical stuff to get done. You probably spend a lot of time on administration tasks, you definitely spend time serving your clients, and if you're a creative entrepreneur, you may feel that putting and pouring all of that into your clients or your customers can feel a little creatively draining when it comes time to create your own marketing, to do your own writing, to do your own storytelling. Here are 3 ways that either through a mindset or through a real experiential shift that you can start to find writing inspiration again. Number 1 is show up to your part and let go of all the rest. This is really inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert. I've talked about her on the channel before. I'm really inspired by her as a writer. She did a TED Talk a few years ago, which is all about having your muse as something outside of yourself. So traditionally, in ancient times, people would see the muse as some sort of being, spiritual being, some creature outside of themselves. And that could really be alleviating because it takes so much of the responsibility off of yourself. And this has its positives and negatives, right? If you're a fantastic writer and you won awards, you might want to feel like, oh, it's all me. But really, a lot of us we're not looking for that level of fame and recognition. And to be honest, a lot of those level writers, especially in the 20th century, that was a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. There's a reason there were a lot of drinking problems that came about, right? So having that much responsibility on your shoulders can be really heavy. And a lot of that is mindset, right? So whether the muse is really something outside of yourself or not, if you can get yourself in the mindset of seeing it that way, it can be really relieving. So consider what your muse might look like. You can always draw a little picture and stick them up on a wall beside you. You could just start to do some meditations where you're having like a conversation with you and your muse. Watch Liz Gilbert's TED Talk. I'll link it down below. But really start to see that you show up to your desk or wherever you do your writing, you take out your tools, whether that's a pen and paper or your laptop, and you clear the space and you show up ready to do your part. Now it's up to the muse to give you the ideas and to inspire you to get it done. So to a certain extent, this can be very liberating and really helpful. Sometimes it may not be enough, but there are definitely people out there who feel like, well, I showed up, it should be super easy. That's not necessarily the case either. It may not be easy, but you should hopefully feel a lot less pressure, which eases you to get into the flow and just makes you way more receptive to your inspirational ideas and just doesn't make you do it perfectly the first time, right? You can just show up and start getting it done. So I find that really freeing. Show up, do your part, and let go of all the rest. I find that really interesting too because it's almost like you take the pressure off of writing inspiration as something that needs to come to you, right? So we're talking in this video about how you find writing inspiration, and this solution is really like very practical. Show up at your desk, clear the space so that you're not distracted and you're ready to do your work. And that is what frees inspiration to come back to you. So by not focusing on it, you free it to come back into your life. Very much a mindset thing, and you may find it useful. Okay, the second and my favorite way of getting creative inspiration is to travel. Now, I am filming this video during the pandemic in 2020, the end of 2020. So travel is very much impossible for me where I am in the world, and probably very limited for others. So it's not necessarily the easiest solution at this particular time. But what I would recommend then is to at least get out into your local environment and approach it like a traveler. So why is travel so powerful? Basically, we enter this different state when we travel, right? So like a baby who is, very youthful, has their whole brain developing, has everything is new is what I'm trying to say. They're really receptive to everything that's going on. All their senses, everything is super intense. And what happens for us when we travel is that really happens again. Everything is intense because everything is new. The smells are new, especially the more different, the places that we're going to. The smells will be new, the sights will be new, the sounds will be new, right? Because maybe the language is different, or maybe the streets, the sound of the streets is different. It really is opening up all our senses, and I believe that there's some scientific research behind this, and if there is, I'll give you a link to an article down below. But basically, we're really getting into the present moment, we're seeing things in a new way, and we're actually going to be able to remember that much more. There's a reason that we remember our travel memories so vividly and strongly, even if we were only on a trip for 5 days, 7 days. It's really, really powerful to travel because it just gets us to make connections in new ways, right? So two senses that weren't connected before, and like, for example, in my case, I remember every time I smell sunscreen, like traditional chemical sunscreen, I think of Canada's Wonderland, which is an amusement park north of Toronto, because at some point early in my life, sunscreen was deeply associated with that very emotional, exciting experience. Especially the first time or a couple times you go to an amusement park, it's huge. For kids, it's amazing, right? So it's really this staple moment. So now there's this cross between the smell of sunscreen and this experience of excitement and great food and being with friends and all that kind of stuff that happened at the amusement park. And that really can happen with travel as well. You'll be able to smell local food at the same time as you see a beautiful piece of architecture, and maybe that unique connection that you wouldn't have had in another environment really inspires you to maybe literally reflect on the journey in your writing, or it just gets you to come up with a creative idea for the next book that you're writing, or it just gives you this feeling that everything is possible. It just gets your mind thinking in new ways because literally there's connections happening in your brain that weren't happening a week ago when you're at home. So it really has an influence, an overflow influence into every creative project you have. If you're really into traveling and you consider yourself an artist or a writer, any sort of creative person, you can probably speak to this, and I'd love for you to talk about that in the comments below. Do you have something like my sunscreen Wonderland story? I think it'd be really cool to find out. The third way to find inspiration for writing pretty much immediately is by learning about history or family history stories. So I find, in my case, when I was about 12, I was really, really into the Roman Mystery series by Caroline Lawrence. And this was obviously historical fiction because it was a little girl who was solving mysteries in ancient Rome, but it was really, really accurate in terms of the history because the writer, Caroline Lawrence, is an archaeologist, so she's extremely well educated about it, and it really brought me into that time period. It was very intense reading those books, and it's a huge series. It's like 19 books or something like that. Learning that and really getting into another time and place through a historical fiction book, or even when you just learn, maybe if you're really into history like I am, sometimes a well-written history book is enough, but particularly I think historical fiction can really get us seeing things from a different perspective again. It's sort of similar to travel, right? This is another time and another place. Even if it's the history of your own country, it's very much another time and another culture in a lot of ways. Some things might overlap, but as soon as you go a couple hundred years back, the culture, the society is going to be quite different. So it can really get you thinking and making connections in new ways again. And things that might happen now couldn't have happened back then, or really exciting wild stories from back then may be kind of dull now, right? So a lot of like romance stories a long time ago, a lot of them had like some sort of forbidden aspect to them, which made them really exciting because there were so many societal restrictions on who was allowed to date, or who was allowed to marry, because there really often wasn't a dating process. Today there's a lot more openness and a lot more flexibility. There's still some things, but you know, and especially depending on the culture you're in, but there's a lot more openness. So it's definitely, you can see situations present themselves in historical fiction that don't really present themselves today that might help you problem solve a problem in your own story, or consider approaching things from a different perspective. So someone who really believes something different because they're in another time really might help you approach things differently. So that's an idea to go with. And then also family histories. So especially I would say if you have a really rich understanding of your family's history. Maybe you're really blessed to have been able to spend a lot of time with grandparents. Maybe your grandparents came from a whole other culture, right? So I'm in Canada, and a lot of people, most people who live here, even a couple generations ago, their family lived somewhere else. In my case, I have Italian family, I have Irish family, I have English family. So there's a lot of very different people, a lot of very different stories, a lot of different struggles, and a lot of different advantages that each of them has. And it's really fascinating to get to look back at those family stories, and you can actually kind of imagine yourselves in their shoes. Like, if you had lived in their time, what would you have done the same? What would you have done differently because of your personality? And unique, again, very similar to history, unique situations that wouldn't really occur now today. So particularly in the most different culture that my family is from Canada would be the Italian side of my family, because they were from southern Italy and, you know, very poor farming areas, and some of the situations they were in were quite different than the ones that I experience now. Largely, what stands out in my mind is the fact that they went on a boat across the ocean, created a whole new life for themselves, had really unique struggles that immigrants will have, especially in the 1950s when it was very hard to be Italian in a lot of ways in Canada. So really interesting perspective on humans, really interesting situations come about. It's very similar to history, but it feels a little bit closer. And you might actually be able, if you have those people around you or people who know of your ancestor stories, you may be able to really get insight into what they were thinking at the time and why they made the decisions that they did, which we can't really get when we read world history. We're just not in their heads unless we're lucky enough to have a primary source like a journal entry from someone. But a lot of the times we're kind of speculating about what they thought based on the actions they took. So that can be something really special about family history. I know not everybody has access to that, but if you do, I think it's really a blessing. So it's wonderful to take advantage of it. If not for your writing inspiration, just to get a little bit more information about how you ended up where you are today, the impact that your ancestors had on you now. Alright, so those are my 3 tips for getting writing inspiration at any time. Again, remember, travel, you can just walk around your neighborhood if you need to, really look at things from a new perspective, consider what you smell, be fairly mindful, essentially. But all of them, generally speaking, you have access to in some capacity, whether in a small way or a big way. So I highly recommend that you give one of these a try. Let me know which one you're going to start with down in the comments below. Alright, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you never miss another video. We talk about copywriting, content marketing, and entrepreneurship here on the Intrepid Emma YouTube channel, and I would love for you to be part of the community. Alright, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!